I think we have successfully changed seats here. And our next presentation will be given by Captain Roger Cox from the Office of Aviation Safety for the issue area, Improve Oversight of Pilot Proficiency.
Good morning. I'll discuss two recommendations in the area of improving oversight of pilot proficiency. In January 2005, the NTSB issued Safety Recommendation A051, which asks the FAA to require that air carriers obtain notices of disapprovals for flight checks for all pilot applicants and to evaluate this information before hiring a pilot. This recommendation was issued as a result of a 2003 ditching accident involving a pilot with a history of check ride failures. In response to this recommendation, the FAA amended its advisory circular providing guidance to operators on implementation of the Pilot Records Improvement Act of 1996. The amendment stated that carriers could obtain additional FAA information on pilot applicants, including notices of disapproval, if a letter of consent was submitted with the pilot's signature. On the basis of this response, the NTSB classified the recommendation open, acceptable, alternative response and asked the FAA to survey all operators after the AC was revised to determine how many required a signed letter of consent from their pilot applicants to release these records. In the 2 years since the advisory circular was amended, the FAA has not completed a survey. Earlier this month, in deliberations on its report of the Colgan Flight 3407 accident investigation, the NTSB reiterated this recommendation and reclassified it open, unacceptable response. In that accident, Colgan was unaware of the previous check ride failures for the pilots involved. In May 2005, the NTSB issued recommendation A0514, which asked the FAA to establish remedial training programs and oversight programs for flight crew members with performance deficiencies. The recommendation was issued as a result of a 2003 hard landing accident in which the flying pilot had a recurring pattern of check ride failures while employed at a Part 121 air carrier. In response to this recommendation, the FAA issued SAFO 06015, remedial training for Part 121 pilots, which recommended voluntary implementation of remedial training to supplement an air carrier's approved training program. The NTSB classified the recommendation open, acceptable, alternative response, pending demonstration that all Part 121 carriers had programs to address pilot performance deficiencies or failures during training. In April 2009, the FAA issued a notice to its principal operations inspectors asking them to verify whether the actions specified in the SAFO had been implemented. Only 36 carriers responded, and only 12 gave evidence of having a suitable remedial program. In June of 2009, the FAA issued a second, more forceful notice which reiterated and broadened the guidance to inspectors on flight crew member training, qualification, and management, and directed inspectors to adjust oversight as needed to increase their vigilance. This recommendation was reiterated as part of the Colgan investigation. That investigation determined that although the captain had training and check ride failures while employed at Colgan, the company did not have a formal program for remedial training and enhanced oversight of pilots with performance deficiencies. In October 2009, the FAA reported 29 of 82 Part 121 carriers had remedial programs in place. However, just last month, January 2010, the FAA stated in its call to action report that most air carriers had programs fully in place to meet the guidance for remedial training programs. Pending a full assessment of the FAA's recent statement, staff cannot assure that meaningful changes have been made. That does complete my presentation. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Captain Cox, and for the aviation staff being nimble and putting this issue on the most wanted list so soon after the Colgan meeting at Member Sumwalt's suggestion. And thank you, Member Sumwalt, for your leadership in this area.
And thank you for your support, Madam Chairman. And I think that we can push a rock here on the board, but if the staff embraces it, it's easier. And thank you for embracing it. It was, after all, staff that did the work on the Colgan accident and brought it before the board, and the Air Sunshine accident. You know, I will I will sound like a broken record because once again, we've got something that is timely. It will take literally an act of Congress to change the Pilot Records Improvement Act. We have been and will continue to be, I suspect, I believe, in fact, next week the chairman is going to testify in at least two chambers two chambers of Congress regarding one of which is at least on the Colgan Air accident. So I think it carries. I don't want to be presumptuous and say that Congress listens to us, but they do seem to listen. When we had the Rail Safety Improvement Act of 2008, Congress wanted to know what's on your most wanted list, and sure enough, positive train control was on that list, and within 2 or 3 weeks, there was a bill that had been passed into law, and I think that when Congress comes to us and says, what do you think about this, the fact that we can say this is on our most wanted list, I believe, and again, I don't want to be presumptuous, but that does seem to carry some weight, and that's why we're here today, is to put weight on things. In the public hearing, and I'm going to speak about the Pilot Records Improvement Act, in the public hearing that we had for Colgan in May of last year, the Vice President of Administration for Colgan stated that they were not required to check into the pilot's background for failed FAA check rides. They weren't required to do it because the act of Congress didn't require it. And she furthermore stated that this was that Colgan was complying with industry best practices. We need to change those industry best practices, and the way to do that is through an amendment of the Pilot Records Improvement Act. So I think this is very timely on staff's part by bringing this forward to put on our most wanted list. And as we talked about the pilot remedial action, the pilot proficiency issues, the remedial programs. Mr. Cox, Captain Cox, you stated that in April of 2009, the FAA put more pressure on their principal operations inspectors to go out and check and see that these companies had them, and yet the principal operations inspector for Colgan sat here the next month and said he didn't even realize that notice had been issued. So we've got to keep the heat on, we've got to keep the pressure on, and this most wanted list is one great way of doing that. So I applaud staff. I think it's important that we be forward-leaning, that we anticipate issues that are important, and certainly this Colgan accident has generated a lot of concern. The Air Sunshine accident did generate some concern, but we need to continue to put the pressure on. So I will support this, and thank you for moving forward with it.
Vice Chairman Hart.
Thank you. I also support it and look forward to addressing this issue in greater depth in the upcoming pilot professionalism industry-wide hearing that we're going to have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Hatter, perhaps that's an opportunity for you to talk about 2 additional upcoming events that we're going to be having. I think that we're taking an important step today by adding this to the most wanted list issue, but it is but 2 recommendations. We issued 25 recommendations a couple of weeks ago to the FAA after the Colgan accident, but I understand those recommendation letters are just going out this week to the FAA. I think we will have the intervening next year before we come back and reconsider our most wanted list to look at the implementation of those recommendations, see how that's going. We may be able to fortify this issue area a little bit with some other items that you all identify in events that you might be holding in the coming months and coming year. If you want to talk about those 2 events that staff proposed, I think that it would be a good time.
The first event has already been mentioned, which is the essentially performance of pilots and air traffic controllers. And that event will be held at the end of May. We haven't picked a date, either the week of May 17th or May 25th. We're still working on that date. My microphone shows on, but okay. So we're working on the exact date of it. Will be for high standards for pilots and air traffic controllers, and be towards the end of May. Not sure what the date of that is. And certainly there may be some additional recommendations that will come out of that meeting. Another forum symposium we plan to hold will be on code sharing, and that will be held in the fall of this coming year, of this year, and the exact date has not been picked yet.
And I think that staff identified these issues and determined that it was probably better to hold these events rather than to address the issues in the Colgan report, because these are not issues that are specific to the Colgan accident. They're not specific to the regional aviation industry. They're industry-wide issues that we think deserve standalone attention, and we're going to be pursuing those. And so I applaud the staff for identifying those important issues. Any additional comments? Mr. Howard? Is there a motion to adopt the staff's recommendation to add the improve oversight of pilot proficiency issue area to the most wanted list and to designate a red designation?
And I'm sorry, also add the two recommendations,
Two recommendations,
please.
yes.
Second.
All in favor signal with a hand and aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The motion has been adopted and the new issue area has been added. Thank you to staff for that presentation. Ms. Rober, can we proceed with the next issue?